Oh my gosh. Then I'll never get it back. Okay. So today we have on the show Dajon Ferrell. She is a veteran, a military sexual trauma advocate, which holy cow, and a public speaker. And I'm so delighted to have you. And I'm also delighted that we spent the first 40 minutes on the phone just chatting it up. Like I just I feel such a I feel like we're soul sisters. And so I'm excited to get this going and just share you with my audience.
Yay! I'm so happy to be here.
Good. Okay. So will you actually, I want us to chat first about how we know each other so we can give people a little bit of context. We met in 2016. Was it 2016 or 17?
Yeah, I think 16.
With
Sure.
Alexander's Grace, which
Yeah.
was a startup that you and I were both a part of that kind of took off and kind of exploded as fast as it took off. Would you say that that's accurate?
Yeah, that was true. That was true.
But
Oh man.
I met you through that process. And I remember the first time you and I had a Zoom date, I was like, I want to be this girl's friend because you were so real and honest.
Isn't that the greatest feeling? I love that. That's one of the best gifts from Alexander's Grace is like the people that I met. Like
Mhm.
it brought together some pretty badass people. And like
It
you said,
really
those
did.
people that you see them and you're like, oh my gosh, I feel at home with you.
Just a sigh of relief. Like, oh, I don't have to put on
Yeah.
any mask in this conversation. It's just I'm gonna just be myself.
Yeah, and like genuine, like I felt like the people there genuinely like wanted the best for each other. Like the people that have evolved the relationships out of meeting there. It didn't feel like that competitiveness or any of that weird
Yeah.
stuff. It was just like really people wanting to do good in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Which was the whole impetus behind it, was like helping people share their messages and do really cool things in the world.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've known each other for about
Yeah.
4 years now, on and off. And can you just give everybody a little synopsis about who you are?
It's so funny. So when I first got in the military, I was in the military for 13 years. And when I got out and was back or first into the civilian world, everybody would say like, oh, what do you do? Like, who are you? And I was so intimidated by this question
It's an
because I didn't,
intimidating question.
yeah, it's like, who am I? What do I do? And I don't necessarily have the elevator pitch of like, I am so and so and I help women live their best lives ever. Like, I don't necessarily have that, and that's okay. So
Yeah. You don't need it.
I I am a creative first and foremost in
An
every day of my
amazing
life.
creative.
Thank you. And so that's what leads my life. And then I'm a mother. My big, I guess what I'm most passionate about is really healing my own wounds and helping others do the same. Like that's the very generic, like
Oh,
base level of like who I am.
I don't think that's generic at all, though. And I so relate to that because I
Mm,
feel like, I feel like my purpose in the world is to create, but also one of my primary roles within that creation is to help people spin pain into something beautiful. You
yeah.
know? So
Yeah,
I
no.
think that that is pretty damn powerful.
It feels the best way to sum it up. Like I said, it doesn't necessarily get to how I do that, but that's because that changes depending on where I'm at and who I'm with. When I'm working with the veteran community, it's totally different than when I'm with civilians. And when I'm on a stage, leading a meditation versus talking to people about business and entrepreneurship, right? Like there's different waves of that. And so I think that when it comes down to it, that's really, even when I'm doing branding for people and they just want a pretty logo and I'm like, well, what is your message and what are you trying to do in the world? Because I can make you a beautiful logo, I can make you a beautiful site, but if like you're
Mhm.
not rooted in the core of what this is and what you want to be bringing to the world, people, that's an energetic extension of you. So like when we can heal all that stuff and they can truly like, I know it sounds like cliche, but like shine their light in the world, it's like, yes, more of that.
That's the secret sauce. And I guess we didn't tell anybody this yet, but you and I both have been in branding and marketing for a long time. And I think, and I think you'll probably agree with me in this, is that the key to great branding is self-awareness. Because
Yeah.
if you know who you are, then you can go out and be who you are. But also as
Mhm.
somebody who knows you, not super intimately, but has followed you for 4 years, you strike me as somebody who is really self-aware. And where do you think that comes from?
Oh man, to be honest, I think that it stemmed from getting to the lowest point in my life where I lost like who I was. And that all comes from
Mm.
conditioning and from wearing masks and from trying to be like who you think the world wants you to be or who your mom wants you to be or all of those things, right? And I got to the point where in the military, which I had great times in the military, but a lot of um, my experience there was my rank. I was my rank. I was what my job was in the military, and I was a part of a team which felt good, but I lost who I was. And so when some things happened in the military that were very challenging for me, such as military sexual trauma. I had experienced sexual assault out of the military as well. It was a different experience though in the military, and I got to the point where I just didn't want to be here anymore. I was really like the pain, the trauma, all of it became so like I didn't even know where to begin,
Mm.
and it began by like getting to that rock bottom where it was like, well, if I'm going to be here. So I took a bunch of pills and obviously made it through. And I kind of made this deal with God. I was in the psych ward and I was on a 72-hour hold. And my work, where I was working at the time, which was the military, um, was saying I couldn't miss work without a doctor's note. And when would I be back? And
Oh
so in that,
gosh.
yeah,
Oh my gosh.
yeah. And my brother called them to tell them that I was, at the psych ward that I had taken all these pills. And they were like, well, she just can't miss work without a doctor's note. We need a doctor's note. And so
A doctor's
I,
note is more important than anything else. It's so
right.
absurd. But then again, at the same time, I feel like so much of the stuff in the military is so absurd. And I say that with confidence
Yeah.
because I was a military wife. And so I saw
Yeah.
firsthand. So, I mean, some of those
It,
regulations, you're just like, this makes no logical sense
it's insane.
whatsoever.
And,
So,
and you start to fall into that. And I think that's where when I got to that rock bottom, it was like, okay, who the F am I anymore? Right. And that's where the self-awareness piece comes from, just to bring it back to your original question.
yeah, yeah. And you know what I think is so, I feel like so much self-awareness occurs from the rock bottoms. Yet our society is so afraid of having any kind of rock bottom. And so we drink or do drugs or eat or shop or whatever so that we don't reach those rock bottoms. But the rock bottom is kind of where the magic happens.
Mm-hmm. There's a quote, I actually have it behind me. It says, I have loved the stars too fondly to be fearful of the night. And I think that like,
Oh,
yeah, it's like that's where those gems are. They're hidden in that darkness, and you don't get to see them until you go there. And I'm a Scorpio, and so I swim in the darkness on the daily. And I think that's where that suicidal ideation came from, was not being able to, like you said, like numb it out anymore. Like I didn't have anything like career or whatever it was to hide behind, and I really had to face it. So
that's, yeah, yeah. And that takes so much bravery, which I want to talk to you about bravery because you are an incredibly brave person. But before I do that, I want to know
mhm.
what made you join the military? Because you
As a,
don't, I
yeah,
know so many men who have been in the military from my husband, Sam, who went to the Air
uh,
Force Academy. And almost all of
yeah,
his military friends are guys, with the exception of a few girls here and there, or a few women here and
uh,
there. But it is so male dominated, as everybody knows. That's not
yeah,
any kind of revelation.
yeah. It's 11 to 18% female, depending on what branch you're in. And right now, the veteran community is, excuse me, 13% female. So yeah, it's very heavily male
Woo.
dominated. I I was living out in California, which I decided to move to California while I was in Nebraska doing a Vicodin study. So I was on Vicodin for 2 weeks. to make money. And I got this revelation that I wanted to live in San Diego. And so I found some roommates on roommates.com, and they ended up being like two really creepy guys. And so I
Oh
moved out to
no.
California and like didn't have anywhere to go. And so I ended up meeting a girl and moving with her, like she just really random like circumstances. And I got to the point where, I mean, it was great, right? Like I was just kind of wanderlust running around, like totally gypsy style, but I felt like a lack of purpose. I just was like, what am I doing with my life? I was 18. 9/11 had just happened. I did go to college for a semester. It was a Lutheran college where everybody was there to become like a preacher or a teacher, and I was working at Hooters. So
Well, and as a creative, it's hard to be within the confines of a religious construct.
oh yeah.
I grew up in super conservative religious Christian family.
Mm-hmm.
And any kind of stepping outside those boundaries was you were shamed right back into control, whether they even understood that or not.
Yeah.
So,
Oh yeah. That got to the point where they were teaching in the school how to like de-gay people. Like they were teaching about these camps
oh,
that people could go to. And I like was so angry. And in my speech class, I stood up and like gave this whole thing about it. And I was like, okay, I gotta leave. And that's part of that whole decision, just to go to California. And then ended up being like, I want to be a part of something bigger than myself. And I don't have any children. And like, where can you go and be all you can be? In the Army. And nobody thought I would make it. I remember being at basic training. I had never shot a weapon. My mom, we weren't even allowed to have like water guns because they were too violent. Like total hippie family. We hugged trees, we talked to ants, all of it. And I was at
wow.
basic
So you
training.
went opposite end of the spectrum. Sorry, I didn't mean to
Yeah.
interrupt you, but I feel like that's worth noting.
Yeah, totally. Like my family wasn't like, oh, we're so proud of you. You're serving your country. My mom was like, you are a slave to the man now. I sent her a picture from basic.
Ooh,
Yeah, right. My
shame.
basic
Ooh.
training. We had that first picture, and she didn't like it because I, didn't like I looked like a robot to her. So it was like very much not an accepted thing for most of my family. And I'm out at the range. We're learning how to fire an M16. There was pictures when we were walking down the lane of like Osama bin Laden and like all these war criminals, and getting you into that mindset of like, you're going to kill these people. And
Mm.
so if we're firing down the range and they're teaching us, how to shoot these weapons, and they say aim, center, mass. So aim, center, mass is like, aiming toward the heart.
Mm.
And I was bawling. And, and my drill sergeant comes over and he's like, God damn it, Private Farrell. And I was like, that's the heart chakra. Like I can't, I can't aim at the heart.
I love you so much.
It was the worst ever. And there was one other moment that's just worth noting, just because like I want people to understand that like I kind of was a unicorn ninja in many ways of my life, specifically the military. We were digging foxholes, and I didn't understand it because you don't go to war now and dig foxholes. So I was very
Yeah.
annoyed the fact that we were going to the woods and digging up all this earth, and I was digging mine, and a big tree root was coming through it, and I refused to like continue digging. And so he made me sit. It was very shallow. I was only probably like 2 feet deep, and he made me sit in this foxhole for hours to prove a point because I wouldn't cut through the tree root. But the tree is unharmed, so I feel like it was a worthy battle.
It was.
It
I mean, some
was.
of that stuff just doesn't make sense. And why do we need to decimate our environment for it? You know?
For what? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and now I think all of our wars, I mean, obviously we still have a lot of violence happening, but so much is moving into tech too. Yet a lot of
Yeah.
the military training, and I don't want to go too deep into this, but a lot of the military training is still like based on like World War II stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And that was like part of my whole thing was like, no, like this isn't even rational. And I did learn, it's funny because I did become really good with a weapon, but I think it's just because I'm a perfectionist
you're
and
a
I'm
badass.
competitive. And I didn't want like the guys to beat me out. So I was like, you know what, if I'm going to be here, I'm really going to do it well. And so I ended up becoming a really good, like I would go to their leadership training schools and I would get distinguished honor grad where, I was like top
Not
of the class,
surprised. Yeah.
which is hilarious because if you look at like who I am and like what I stand for. But yeah, I was like, if I'm going to do this, like, and that was hard for me because now transition 13 years later, and having like the sexual assault and all of that, and then realizing that I had put all my identity into being a soldier, and like, now who am I?
Oh,
Like,
the next like rock bottom, who am I? So, okay, can we
yeah.
touch on that? You're in the
Hmm.
military, kind of unexpectedly. It wasn't like something you'd been dreaming of your whole life.
No,
You're in the
not at all.
military, you're finding your identity as somebody who is going through these leadership things and excelling. And then can you talk about the sexual trauma and like kind of
Yeah.
what happened there?
Yeah. So I actually at this point was a mom. I was married. I had just had my son. So he was about a year old, and I went for a training exercise to Croatia, and which is interesting because it was supposed to be a very like almost like a little 2-week camp where we were going to go and train side by side with the Croatians,
Which
learn their
sounds kind of
weapons.
idyllic. Like Croatia is so
Yeah,
beautiful.
it's amazing, and the people are amazing. So yeah, and I had been to Bosnia. I had been deployed to Bosnia, and I just love that part of the world. And so I was like jumping up and down to go. And I was public affairs. So in the military, I was actually part of my career. I did supply. I was also military police, and then I ended up in public affairs, which is journalism, photography, graphic design type
Ooh,
stuff.
yeah,
Right? Oh, it's so good.
yeah.
Um, so which is another whole nother thing about how I ended up in the military being a creative and transitioning it as a
Mm,
civilian. But
your
so I'm
soul
in
is so strong. It
right,
knew.
it knew all along. So I'm in Croatia, and I was basically assigned. I would go around with the leadership and talk with like the local mayor. We'd take our general to meet with people. We'd escort them, and which was cool. I got to see a lot and meet a lot of really cool world leaders, and that was amazing. But there was
Incredible.
right. So it's really really cool. So this Croatian general, we were assigned to do this dinner, and I won't get into all the details, but just to give a little bit of background of why this rocked my world so much. We were assigned to do a dinner off post, so there was all these very high level U.S. soldiers with very high level soldiers off post, and we had this dinner. There was a band, and I was just there taking photographs. I was kind of like, we had a big day the next day, so I was more focused on like, when is this going to be over, because it was a
Yeah,
lot of shaking hands and kind of boring photography type stuff.
yeah.
And I wanted to get back and get rest because we had like 21 different foreign leaders coming in the next day, and we had a lot of stuff going on. So I was just kind of like, okay. So when our general got up to leave, everybody, all the US soldiers got up with him and left, and I had been escorted there by a Croatian public affairs officer. So everybody just, including myself, assumed that I would ride back with him.
Yeah.
But their general at this point had been drinking, and he was talking to them in Croatian and basically relieved them and told them that he was going to take me home. I didn't know that this is what was happening at the time. And at this point, I still wasn't, when he said, like, I'll get you back, I was more just like annoyed because I was like, well, if that was the case, I could have just caught in a ride with, my people.
Yeah.
And like, now you're delaying me because he's continuing to drink. And like, I was just tired and ready to get out of there. I had had my son like 6 months prior to that. And, still in that mode of just like really valuing my sleep. So
Yeah.
I was just wanting to get back. And we get in the vehicle finally, and we drove to this small, we were driving the countryside back to base, and he stopped in this small town, and there was this church and this kind of town square, really beautiful area. And he's like, you like photography, right? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, this is the town of blah blah blah, and he starts telling me all these facts, and he's going to walk me around the square, but it's like dark, it's late, every shop is closed, and I'm kind of just like so he goes into this bar and he orders a round of drinks. The bar is actually closed, but the owner in this country, their like officers are kind of like war heroes because
Yeah.
their conflict didn't happen that long ago,
Mhm.
and they didn't. It's different than the U.S. military here, where a general could walk around and nobody has a clue who he is as civilians. But over there, they're really part of their community. So he's looked at as like a political figure almost.
Yeah.
And so they're
Okay.
like, "Oh, come in." They open the bar and they're serving
Oh my
drinks, and
God.
yeah, and I wasn't drinking any of them because I didn't want to drink. So I wasn't like. So he started drinking my drinks, and he was pretty drunk. We go to finally leave, and I was trying to make small talk because like I felt like he's a general, and in our country that's a big deal. And I was trying to be respectful because I didn't
Yeah.
want to
Well,
like
and in the military too, everything is about rank, like you said at the beginning of this conversation, and you can't be disrespectful or you risk some serious punishment. It's not like a normal workplace, like, okay,
uh-huh.
get a slap on the wrist. In the military, you can be kicked out. So
Yeah.
the ramifications are huge.
And for me, it was, now we're dealing with a foreign, you know, general officer,
Yeah.
and we are guests and we have a partnership here. And so it was even more like me trying to be professional.
Oh,
Yeah,
that feels
really.
icky. Oh, I'm just like, the hair on the back of my neck stood up.
Yeah. And so that's part of the whole like full circle moment. So so he's drinking, we go to get back in the vehicle, and on the way there, he had sat in the front passenger seat. He had a driver and I sat in the back seat. And we get in the vehicle and he goes to get in the back seat with me. And that was the first moment that I was like, okay, like this isn't normal and I'm uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And so just we started to drive, and I was trying to get his driver's attention at one point, and I had like tears streaming down my face, and him saying that the typical, you want this, and like that, like I hear a lot of women talk about, yeah, just really
Yes.
gross type stuff. And I was just like frozen, and I tried to make eye contact with his driver. And there's a point to this, I'm not trying to trigger anybody, but his driver moved the rear view mirror and turned the music up. And I
Oh my
realized
God.
that like,
He had done this before.
yes, yes.
What
Not
a
only
monster.
had he done this before, but like people were supporting and enabling him to do this. And
Oh
so
my gosh.
when I got back to base, and I like, he was still, it was weird. He was still like trying to get me to come back to his cat. Like all this had happened. And I was just like shell shocked. And I was like, how is he still like, I just know, like but I couldn't like just be like, fuck you. Like I'm
Yeah.
out, So I was still just like shocked. And like I said, hadn't been drinking. So like, I wasn't drunk. I was of my right mind. Like I knew what was going on. And so I got back to the barracks where I was staying, and there was a female leader, and this was pretty late, and she knew something was wrong. And so she went out and talked to me, and she just happened to be our unit's like sexual assault response coordinator. So like it was the perfect person to have to talk to, because on this trip, there was only like 6 females. And so to actually get there and have this conversation with her was key. So we had to go through the whole training exercise the next day. And if you look back at the photos, I remember processing the photos, and there would be like this group of 30 people looking at a demonstration happening, and he would be looking directly into the lens of my camera, like creepy, just
Oh,
predator, you know what I mean? Like icky
yes.
stuff.
Just total
So
boundary buster.
yeah. Other stuff goes into that story which aren't relevant. The point that I wanted to get to with some of those details is when I got back to the States, I didn't know if I wanted to report it or not, because I knew I was going to be fine. But what really was the clincher, and this gets back to why I do everything that I do today with helping people heal their wounds and healing my own, is that like, if I didn't turn him in and another US soldier went over there the next training exercise and got hurt by him, I would feel horrible. Secondly, if he's this ballsy to do this to US soldiers, like what is he doing to his own? And though their females are much more subservient, they are not considered equal in their military. They aren't even allowed to participate in sports days because it's only the guys. And so I thought, he's obviously comfortable and he's preying on his power. So he ended up getting removed from but the embassy had to get involved. It was this big whole ordeal. And I started to feel people were saying that I was messing with the partnership, and I started to like not be Sergeant Farrell anymore. I was just this girl now that's like, she's over here complaining and causing problems. And my whole persona of being this like badass fucking US soldier was just like stripped. And my mom at one point said to me, like, maybe this happened to you because you are strong enough to speak up. And maybe that's what the whole purpose of all of this is. And I was like, all right, I'm going to cling to that. And so I did, spoke up, he got removed, but I really, that was when everything shifted for me in my military career. And I had another incident happen with a supervisor it's interesting. He didn't actually, there was no physical contact. He was sending me pictures of him in his underwear and just being inappropriate.
Ooh.
And, but it ended up, because he was well connected within our unit, he was using a government phone to do all of this. They had evidence of everything. But they did, it's hard to explain without getting into details that people don't understand. But basically, they made it look like I was this like thirsty female that was like,
Oh my gosh.
making him do these things. It was horrible. And so I ended up in
Oh,
this,
that's such bullshit.
it was all these like good old boys clubs, and they would
Yeah.
do things like they would bring me into the office and they would counsel me, which counseling in the military is like a reprimand. They would say, you know, you're not smiling enough, and just weird. Yeah. And I'm like, are you doing this to like Colonel so-and-so over there? Like, no, why is me not smiling enough? You know, you can't reprimand me for that. So I ended up at that point being so shell shocked and so like depressed just putting on the uniform. And that's why now to this day, like I do retreats for female veterans struggling with trauma related to military sexual trauma and PTSD. The thing that sucks though, well, it all sucks, but the thing that was hardest for me when I first started doing this work was that there are more men that this is happening to than women. We just don't know, and they aren't speaking up. So like,
Holy cow.
a revelation of like, yeah. And now men will come to me regularly. I was at my son's hockey practice and there was a Vietnam veteran, and he didn't even know my story. And he started to tell me about what happened to him. I just told him that I work with female veterans struggling with PTSD. And he's like, yeah, that happened to me. And he starts telling me, he's like, I haven't told anybody this. And so I started to see these people coming out, and I realized like so people talk often about the suicide numbers within the military and within the veteran community, and everybody assumes that it's related to combat, and it's, they go through all that stuff. But the thing is that the military and the veteran community are just another faction of like society as a whole. And this depression and this anxiety and all of that is running rampant in the civilian world. We're just not tracked as civilians. We don't have mental health checkups as civilians that are mandated. We don't have tracking devices and numbers. And not that I have a tracking device in me, but like there's all these metrics that go into the military. And so like it could behoove people to look at this and go, oh, this is what's happening to society as a whole.
That makes so much sense. I feel like I'm flooded with things I want to say, and I don't want to do word vomit right now. But first of all, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Thank you for being so brave to then come back. I mean, I'm putting myself in your shoes right now, and I want to say I would have the balls to do it. I don't know if I would, but coming back and having the balls to report it and then continue to stand up for yourself, because here's the thing, and it was the same in the civil rights movement. The first people down the line are the people that get hit the hardest. And you were one of those people that started talking about it. And I just want to commend you for being so brave, because that's terrifying. I mean, I haven't been in the military, but I feel like I've been in the military because of my husband, and you just don't step out of line. You just don't do it. And you stepped out of line for such an important cause. So I'm thankful for you for paving the way for the women who came after you.
Thank you. It feels good to know that there was a moment where I knew if I spoke up that I was ending my career. Like I knew it. And I hear these stories about people at the end of their life and what their biggest regrets are, you know? And a lot of them, it's like, you know, I worked for somebody else and I didn't follow my own dreams, or I didn't spend enough time with family, or I didn't speak my truth. Like I didn't, do the things that were important to me. And I just followed what I thought everybody else thought I should do. And it was like, you know what? I want to be able to, at the end, and that's really what matters, because this life is temporary. And whether you believe in past lives or any of that, it's still getting to that end point and being like, you know what? I was true to myself. And if I felt that intimidated to speak up, how do the men that this is happening to feel? And then later I ended up, it's interesting because after all of this, my brother actually ended up getting assaulted in the military, in the Air Force. And like,
oh my gosh,
it all was coming like full circle, right? Like all of these moments. And I thought like, this was all so that I could speak to those people, so that I'm not necessarily a typical soldier or a typical military person, I'm very much spiritual and woo woo. And I used to have crystals in my uniform and all the things.
I
But
love it.
now I know, now I can speak to that group. Now, when I have retreats and I bring people
Yeah.
into this safe, beautiful, sacred space, I could be like, I've been there, I've lived it, I feel you, because a lot of them have a hard time I have all these light worker friends that are like, I want to help the veterans. How do I help them? And I'm like, you can be there and it's great. But if you haven't walked in their shoes, it's going to be hard to earn their respect and their trust. So like,
And
that's the thing I'm realizing.
you're so unique too, because just your energy, you hold a safe place for people to be willing to talk about that stuff. And like sexual trauma, I was molested, and talking about that kind of stuff is so hard just in general. But then when you layer on the military on top of it, I can imagine that would be there's just so many more barriers. And here you are, this like military badass, but also somebody who is very centered in your own energy. And I just feel like you are such a gift to be able to hold this safe place for people to share. Because
I hope so.
I just can't imagine trying to share to somebody who's not going to be receptive, and how debilitating that would be.
Yeah. I think all decisions, when I think about like tough decisions that I'm making today, or when you get up in the morning and you're just feeling overwhelmed, or what is my purpose, or whatever, all of those things that come with being a human. And it goes back to like, how can I serve myself and the greater good in this moment, right? And that experience happened totally for me and not to me, so that I could grow into that knowing of what it feels like to represent and to keep myself a clear channel. So when I feed myself nourishing foods, when I drink enough water, when I get enough sleep, when I do all of those things, it's not because I'm shitting on myself and telling me I should do it. It's because I'm trying to keep myself as clear of a channel possible, because I know that it affects the collective consciousness. I know as an empath who feels the trauma from other people and all of that, that the more that I heal mine, the better I can help make the world, even if I'm only impacting this right here, this body, this channel, even if I'm not going out and making a big movement. That is like the most amazing like impact I can make on a daily basis. And then you get into the other layers of being like a mother and a friend and a community member, right? Like all of the other layers that you're having a butterfly effect on. It's like, oh my gosh. And I think that like in this world of, and we've talked about this earlier, in this world of being an influencer and of having a following and blah, 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 blah. Like, while it's all great, like, are you feeling whole inside? Are you waking up each morning, like with that genuine, like knowing that in this moment, you're living your purpose, no matter whether you get out of your fucking pajamas or not? Like, like
yes. Yes. I feel like what a beautiful way to wake up. Like, how can I be a clear channel today? Because you're so right. There's that butterfly effect where if I'm not clear, if I'm not centered and in my body every day, I'm kind of useless to everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah. Including yourself, right?
It's so freaking beautiful. I can't wait for people to hear this. Okay. So, next question. You experienced this sexual trauma. What did recovery look like for you? How did you cope? And where did you turn?
Yeah. Okay. So first and foremost, I started at the VA, which, while they are improving, has its challenges.
Yeah.
So I would go to the VA and I would be hit on by old men. Like, they didn't make soldiers like me
Oh.
back in my day. Like all of the creepy things. I remember, yeah, having to go through, they have an exam process, not from the trauma, but when you get out of the military, they make you go through this whole process to check your body, to see what you have. Because if later on you come back and say, well, now my knees are hurting, and they can be like, well, we did the exam and your knees weren't hurting when you got out, or whatever. So they do this whole thing, they check your heart. And I remember being in this room and I had just a bra on, and there was a male nurse and he was doing the EKG, and the door was open, and it was a doorway that a lot of the patients walked by to check into the front desk. And I asked him if he could shut the door, and he's like, oh, they've all seen boobs before. Like, weird, just, yeah. And I'm literally there, like, also going to like depression counseling and nightmare therapy for all the sexual trauma that happened, while this male nurse is like, they've seen boobs before, you're fine, And I think that like, it was all like, it's cool to now look back and see how all those experiences led to where now I can help and hold space for people, because I get it. When people go, just go to the VA and get help. Just, oh, are you
It's
going to
not that
therapy?
simple. It's not that
No,
simple.
it's
And that's why,
not.
hopefully at some point you will start a podcast, because I just want to listen to it. But that's why I think like this podcast and this work that I'm doing is so important, because we're having conversations where it's not like somebody has a trouble and then all of a sudden there's success. We're going into these in-between moments, and it's not as simple as going to the VA and then you're just cured.
Yes. And like, what's frustrating for me is that like a lot of people don't understand or have the self-worth or the knowing that they're enough to go, this isn't working for me, I've got to find a better way. Like they'll go to the VA and have a really bad experience, and then they're just like, well, I must be fucked up, or I'm broken now, so this is my life. And I've been there. I get it. There's no shame or blame or anything in that, but it's scary to be thinking this is where I was supposed to go to get help, or whatever it might be for you. Maybe you turn to a family member, or maybe whatever it is, and I went to my husband at the time, and he told me, well, you must have done something to make this guy think it was okay to do that to you. You must have let him on. You must have, like,
what?
And
What?
My ex-husband is like he's a good human being, but like he couldn't fathom in his mind, because he grew up in a small town where this stuff just didn't happen. And it did, but it wasn't being talked about. But in his mind, it just didn't happen. And, and I think that like, so I was going through all of that. And I think that when it comes to seeking help and our healing journey, we have to trust our intuition. We have to trust our gut and know and advocate for ourselves. And if we get a doctor that's not getting it right, or a therapist, whoever it is, or a coach, and it just doesn't feel right, or they're not driving with us, drive on and find somebody else. But like that has to do with you
don't
and knowing
quit.
what you want, need.
Don't quit until you get the help. And I think that, oh my gosh, I want to shout this from the rooftops. Everybody listening, Dajon just dropped a truth bomb. We have to advocate for ourselves until we get to a point where we feel like we're in a good place. And then we have to advocate for ourselves for our whole lives. But I think that, that's a worthiness thing too. Everybody you're worthy of the help that you need. And it may not be the first person that you meet. It may, you may have to kiss a couple of frogs, for lack of a better expression, when it comes to any kind of healing.
And that's a lesson, not only in unworthiness, but also trusting. Like, we've heard stories where somebody didn't, get the second opinion or whatever. We've heard stories where I've heard stories, for example, where somebody was having issues with their implants, and they thought they had illness from their implants, and that the doctor was like, that's not a thing. That's not a thing. And then they ended up finding somebody who was like, that is actually a thing. And they got the implants removed, and all of a sudden health was back to 100% and all of this stuff, right? It's like, we have all of this within us. And when we're constantly seeking the answers without, or outside of us, or, oh, if I take this diet, or if I do this thing, or if I get this Botox, or and I'm not saying anything like about any of that. It's just, why are you doing it? Why are you choosing to
What's the intention behind it?
Yeah. Like, am I eating this food because I feel like I should be eating it because I need to lose weight, or am I eating it because it's nourishing my body?
And that's such an important distinction. And I think, going back to what you just said about looking outside of ourselves, I think in our culture and in most of our conditioning, I won't speak for everybody, but I'll speak for myself. We're taught to kind of go with whatever culture is teaching us to do. And we're taught to seek validation, to seek knowledge outside of ourselves. That's why all these books in here are turned backwards, because this year I was like, it stops now. I'm going to trust my own gut. And I want to read all the books because I love books. But at the same time, I'm not going to allow anybody else to be an authority on my life except me. I have to stop giving my power away. And I love that you like wrangled, like Wonder Woman, like wrangled your power and brought it back in.
So there's one more piece of this, like, as you were talking about the books and claiming your power and all of that, it just reminded me, there was a point within my healing journey. I ended up, I went to a conference called Celebrate Your Life. And it was, it's like all like Michael Beckwith and Elizabeth Gilbert and all these
all the cool people.
And I was very new to that whole world, so I didn't even a lot of the speakers, I didn't even know who they were, but I chose the sessions by like what made me feel good. And there was one woman when I registered, they said, oh, you get to pick a book from one of our authors. We're giving a book away to people, blah, 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 blah. And I looked and I was so, oh man, in my head that like, I didn't even take the time to really like, what are these books about? And there was one with a woman on the cover and she just looked like I wanted to be friends with her. So I was like, I'll pick that book. And it was about angels. And so this is another, like, sometimes you just gotta like lose your mind and follow your heart. Like when people are like, oh, I'm losing my mind. It's like, lose your mind because you've got everything you need within your heart, right? So,
I think that needs to be the social media graphic for this. Lose your mind and follow your heart.
I love it.
That is so beautiful. Okay.
It was one of those moments, right? So I go to her session and she's talking about the angels, and I ended up at the hotel bar drinking a martini, eating whatever I was having to order, and I like was devouring this book, and it was all about connecting and other stuff. So anyways, I ended up at a retreat in Arizona where she has a retreat center, and I went to her mind, body, spirit training. And so I'm in there, and this was part of the whole healing part, and I'm talking about how angry I am, and I'm having all of this stuff come up about all the people that have either assaulted me, assaulted my brothers, or whatever it is, and I'm wondering forgiveness, like where do I get forgiveness and how do I begin? And I thought she was gonna like, this is the difference between spirituality and religion. I thought she was gonna pull out, well, what would Jesus do, or blah 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 blah. And yes, like
go to this verse, honey.
Like, yeah, like Jesus was like this amazing, awesome human, of course, and had a beautiful heart, of course. But like, that's just not the answer when you're trying to heal your own stuff. You can't just idealize this perfection of what consciousness is and say, that's like the whole good vibes thing. Just think good vibes. Like you can't just automatically skip to
I need
good
something
vibes.
Tangible. Like I need something tangible. I need some steps. I need to know what it feels like to forgive. I don't need to be told what it looks like. I need to like feel. So tell me how I'm supposed to feel.
Gotta do the work.
Yes. Or not how I'm supposed to feel, but what steps I need to take to, you know what I mean?
To get there, Yes. And so she said, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't know the exact words at this point, but it was basically to the extent of, what if before you came to this earth, like what if you had a soul contract with this person and he said, I love you enough that I will come down there and teach you this lesson. And I was pissed. Like I was like, what? Like I traveled to Arizona, I paid all this money to be here, and you're just telling me that like I had this soul contract. But that when the day ended, like our day, like she said that, and then it was like, well, okay, everybody, see you tomorrow. And it was the most beautiful unlocking of a door for me, because I had bad relations with my mom. I had, we all have these people in our life where we just hold on to the anger and the grief, and then we just think we're just supposed to forgive because it's the right thing to do. But when I started to look at it from him as a soul versus this really grimy, creepy guy, and thinking about hurt people. So like what had to happen in his life, right? And I'm not saying that we dismiss the action or the behavior, or that we just whitewash over it. But it gave me a different context to have a conversation with it. And so I actually went and did an exercise where I kind of went into meditation and offered his soul a yellow rose as like a sign of like friendship. And I know this might sound weird to people, but like this was just my journey.
So powerful.
It was so good. And I sat and I offered this yellow rose just on a soul, like from my soul to his soul, not like thinking about the anger I had or the, just the resentment or anything, just like soul to soul. And because I believe that at a soul level, like we are all good people. And so that for me, we had a conversation soul to soul. And like I said, this might be like way out there for some people, but that
I love
was
it.
Like, it was the pivot point in my like transition from like pain to power, because I did in that moment take my power back, because before that I was scared of all of it. And so then after that, I started to do that with everybody, all the people in my life, like the ex-boyfriends, the whatever. I started to have these, and I do it with my mom on the regular. My mom and I haven't talked for like 9 years, and her and I have rose conversations all the time now because it's just like on this earthly plane, whatever's going on in her life, she's not able to be present and be in, you know, one-on-one conversation with me, which is okay. And I have these moments where I'm afraid that like we won't ever have a conversation in this life, you know? And so like having those rose conversations, I think, is a really soft way. And it's kind of like writing a letter in a way and burning it. But for me, it was like an opportunity to have an actual dialogue with that person.
So beautiful. A couple things came to mind while you were talking about that. Number one is that forgiveness to me kind of equals boundaries. And I say that because it's not, and I've had a difficult relationship with my dad for a long time. And when I was younger, I thought, well, when I forgive, I just have to let him in. And that if I've forgiven somebody, then that means that I can't hold on to anything, and I just have to allow them to act however they're going to act and not get upset. And as I've gotten older, I realized that forgiveness is more about boundaries for what you will and what you won't allow, but it's that letting go of the anger piece. So that was the first thing that came to my mind. And the second thing that came to my mind with these rose conversations is that we can have soul-to-soul conversations with people without having to have physical contact. So whether or not you think that's woo, whoever's listening, whether or not you think that's woo-woo or not, I believe that to be the case where we can talk to somebody's higher self wherever we are. And if that's the only way that we can get some closure or some clarity, then I think that's such a beautiful thing. Not only a beautiful thing, but also incredibly powerful and something that we need to have in our toolbox as we grow and mature and continue to try and figure out who we are.
It's so true. And for the people too that feel like maybe it goes against what you believe, or maybe it, you know, you're like, does that really work? And you start to get into your head. I think that like, for me, what I do now is like, even if it's a placebo effect, you know, like even if it's not, I mean, I'm not saying go against maybe what your religious beliefs might be, but like even some of the things that I do in the morning, I take ashwagandha and I, you know, take certain collagen, and I,
yes,
I do
me too, things, right? me too.
It's part of my ritual. And like people, especially like Virgos, they like to be like, well, does that actually work? And what's the science?
And I'm a Virgo. I'm a Virgo, but here's the thing is I'm like a hippie Virgo, and I'm so thankful, but I'm connected spiritually that I am same boat. Like if it's a placebo effect, who fucking cares? It's working for me.
Exactly. And I think that's where, like, when it comes to getting, like, losing your mind and getting back to your heart, right? Like, that's part of it. It's like, maybe in that moment, like, not worrying about if is this actually working, blah, 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 but how does it make me feel? Like, do I feel the release? Do I feel freedom? Do I feel lighter after I have these conversations? And that's, oh my gosh. And when we talk about forgiveness and keeping a clear channel, forgiveness is part of that, right? So like, that's part of clearing that channel. And because if we have those little, like, if we're, imagine like, okay, we're electricity outlets, and throughout the day, we have these little plugs, and they plug into, like, that person cut me off in traffic, I didn't get that job I wanted, like, this person I got in an argument with, or whatever, right? And then there's all this subconscious things that
like
we're constantly,
shocks.
Yeah. And then at the end of the day, if you're not like doing your spiritual maintenance, those things just run you. Like, all of a sudden your day has been created before you even get up, because you're plugged into so much bullshit.
That is another truth bomb. I just want to sit in that for a second because it's so true. And I love just the visual of keeping a clear channel too.
Yeah. And when I say, that's why I like to give visuals, because I am a visual person, because like, it's like, but what does that mean? You know, and having the visual of even like getting up and making coffee in the morning, and the beans and the water, and you can have whatever analogy works for you. But when we wake up with that knowing that we can create our day, or it creates us, it's not like we're in the day-to-day grind of humanness. Like when people are like, well, yep, that's my life. What do you know, go figure. It's just like, no, like
throwing in the towel.
They're speaking limitations into existence. Like they are claiming the limitations. And so that's another piece, I think, of like, even as a parent, like when my son wants something that I don't necessarily want to spend the money on, instead of being like, wow, does money grow on trees? I'm like, well, let's think about it. Like, you know, like, is this where we want to put our energy? Do we want to do this, or do we want to do this with our money, you know? And then he gets to go, no, actually, I would rather have this camping experience over another Matchbox car or whatever it is, right? Like,
It's so
and it's
important
just
for him. It
empowering us.
shows. Yes, you're
Oh,
empowering him with money and those
mhm.
decisions, because those are things that we have to learn.
Yeah.
But so often we don't learn them until we're
Uh,
thousands of dollars in debt.
like,
Oh,
think about like all the programming that like most of us come into as adults around money.
oh
Like,
my gosh.
it's like
Yeah. I'm trying to
insane. That's
deprogram
a
so
whole nother
many of those
podcast.
things. Yeah. Yeah, which I'll definitely have you
Yes.
back on for that, because yeah, I mean, I think we have some similarities in our backgrounds there, but yeah,
Mhm.
that's something that I am actively trying to heal from, is that worthiness piece of, hey, if I want to make X amount of dollars, that doesn't make me less spiritual or more materialistic
Mm,
or any of those things, but I have to believe that I'm worthy of it, to
yep.
actually call it in, or to do the work and,
Yeah.
charge the price, you know? Okay, so I want to ask you another
Yeah.
question. And I think this is
Okay.
like, a, I'm just going to ask it. You're such a lover and an encourager in the online space. And I've been following you for years, like 4 years, and you've consistently been loving and encouraging. What fuels you to be such a positive light despite all of these hardships that you've endured?
Yeah.
And you're so raw and authentic and honest too.
It's interesting. I mean, we touched on this a little when we were just chatting out before we started recording, and it's interesting. Like, it's almost hard to hear somebody say that. Like, it's hard to hear somebody say you're an encourager, you're so loving, and all of that, because that's that self-worth piece of like, I'll get, so I'll full circle this. Basically, I think that it's me wanting to help others feel the way and be seen the way that I want to be seen. And
Oh,
you know
yeah.
what I mean? So like,
Mhm.
even if
I know
like,
exactly what you mean, friend. I know exactly what you
like if like, even if I don't necessarily understand where somebody's coming from, even if I can just be there and be like, I hear you and I see you,
Mhm.
and just I acknowledge you in this moment. You know, I think that
Mhm.
like, there's so much black and white today. Like, you're either a Republican or a Democrat. You either believe in vaccines or no vaccines. You either believe, like, there's all of this just division, and duality in some ways can be like, it's just part of our existence. But
Sure.
it's there's so much gray area in life. Like, there's so
Mhm.
much, like, I can be a positive person and be really super fucking depressed. Like,
Mhm.
like all
Yeah.
of that. And
Yes. There's
and
a
so
dichotomy in all of us.
yes. And so I think that when it comes to being encouraging, it's really just wanting to put out into the world what I want to receive back. And to be honest, I haven't done that consciously. Like, I wasn't going, I want this, so I'm going to put this out. But when I reflect on it, when you say that I've consistently been this way, and I look back and I'm like, really, I didn't notice that, because I'm experiencing my own ebb and flows of life.
Sure.
Um, but that connection to humanness. So even when I'm in my lowest
Mhm.
of lows, like when I was living in my car, I knew that a lot of people have it much worse. And B, I can still also be sad in this moment. And so I want other
Mhm.
people to feel the same. I want them to
Mhm.
feel accepted and seen right where they're at.
That permission. Well, and maybe that comes back to your awareness about being a clear channel. So you may not even
Mm,
understand that you're encouraging people and loving them, but you're such a clear channel that you're channeling these things and
mhm.
releasing them, which is
Could be. That's
so
pretty dope.
cool. It's so cool. Unicorn Ninja. It's so cool. Okay. So next question is, um, you've taken some pretty epic trips to connect with what matters to you, and you've even lived out of your car for a brief period. Where does this kind of courage within you come from?
Mm, I just want to feel all that life has to offer, and it's gonna come at me no matter what. Like, I'm gonna have, like, it's the whole adage of like, once you lose one problem, another one replaces it and all that, right? Like, we're gonna have challenges each day no matter what. But like, when I go out, and choose to put myself in uncomfortable situations, there's like a sense of, I don't know, like adventure, like this sense
Yeah.
of like, even living out of my car, I was like really excited for what I was going to learn and what I was going to experience. And there were moments where I was really lonely and really sad. And it made me think about the people that are lonely and sad, but don't have a car to live from, or so like even today I saw one woman, and this is part of probably why I like to keep it real. I saw a woman posting, and I love all humans, but sometimes I feel like some
They
people
drive
try
us
to be
batty.
so filtered. Yeah, like
Yes.
so filtered and so perfect. And she posts all these perfect photos of her family and matching outfits. And it's great. Like I obviously follow her because I love her character and who she is, but sometimes it's annoying. So she
Yeah.
posted a photo with a quote about, oh, I know this pandemic is hard, but just stay home and enjoy time with your family. And I was like, that's a really fucking privileged thing to say,
It
because
is.
not everybody is just sitting baking. One lady, she said, my grandpa fought in World War whatever, and all that the government is asking us to do is stay home. I've been baking and enjoying time with my family. And I'm just like, first of all, not everybody has a family. Not everybody has a safe home to be in.
Or
Not
food
everybody
to
has
be able to
food.
bake.
Yeah, like all of this
Yeah.
stuff. And I just feel like, for me, when I put myself in uncomfortable situations, it makes me feel like I have more resiliency. I'm not getting complacent. In the Army, we have a saying that complacency kills. I think that in civilian world, you might not be having bullets shot at you, but the more complacent you are, the more that your soul dies. And
Yeah.
so I think that,
You
like,
plateau.
yeah,
Totally.
I thrive in those challenging environments.
You're so inspiring. I wish I could just reach through Zoom and give you a giant hug.
Oh, I
I
would love
also wish
that.
that we lived closer so we could have girls' nights. We're just gonna have to
Yeah,
make that happen. I'll just fly
we
to you
will.
when all of this is done.
We will. We're gonna do it.
Yes, I know. Or maybe we do the Nashville trip. Okay, we'll talk more about that. But okay, so I've done this in our conversation before we started, but I've been diving into self-worth recently because I'm trying to heal my own self-worth issues.
Mhm.
And I want to know how you deal with low self-worth if you struggle with it, or how you have cultivated a high sense of self-worth if you feel like in some areas you have a really high sense of self-worth. Because for
Oh
me,
yeah.
just as a little background, like there are some areas where I feel like Beyonce and such a badass. And then there are some areas where I'm like, I want to disappear. So,
Uh-huh.
again, going back to what you said, it's not black and white. There's a lot of dichotomy in here, a lot of gray area. So,
Yeah.
yeah, can you touch on self-worth and your journey with it?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm definitely working through this. We talked a little bit about it earlier, but I have a man friend, a man person in my life, and him him coming into my life. I'm like, ooh, squirrel girl over here. um, so he came into my life in a really interesting way, and it's a whole nother story. Definitely was not looking. Definitely was like on my own, like I'm independent, I don't need a man. And so of course the universe was like, well, you don't need a man, but here's a nice man here. And he has shown so much genuine love, like just genuine understanding. And even when I'm in an ugly moment, and it's been hard for me because it's easy for me to be vulnerable when I just live in my little house by myself. And I can have my little vulnerability hangovers, and then I just drive on. Like, it's easy to feel inspired when you're not dealing day in and day out with relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And so him presenting me just like, I don't know, just unconditional feeling love has been really hard. So the other day I was like bawling and having a super ugly moment. And he's like, I wish that you could just see what the rest of the world sees in you. Like, this happened like a week ago.
Oh, yes.
I know. And I had so much pain in my heart when he said that. I mean, yes, was I like, oh, yes. And I was like, yeah, fuck yeah. Like, why am I doing this to myself? Like, why am I beating myself up? Why am I comparing myself? Like, I know that that's not the way to go. I know how it makes me feel. And so I think that for me, self-worth is every day. It's like this evolving thing. And sometimes it means unfollowing somebody on social media just because I don't have a healthy relationship with their profile. And
Yeah.
it's nothing
Yeah.
personal, right? But it's just my mental health matters. And so if I'm constantly comparing my fitness to theirs or my business to theirs, I need to take it or hide them or whatever. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's putting on something that just makes me feel joyful and not trying to be a certain way in my body. I think that it evolves, and I think it always will. I don't know that I'll
Mhm.
ever get to the point where I'm just like, yeah, I'm good. I'm completely worthy, because I kind of almost feel when you get to that point, your soul is ready to go back home. Like, I don't
Mm.
know. Maybe,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I know what you're saying. Well, and
Yeah.
I think I was having a conversation with my friend yesterday about this, but I just want to get to a point where I feel healthy and strong.
Mm.
And I always
Yeah.
will be growing, but I do want there to be a time where I'm not carrying some of the baggage that I'm still carrying, that I'm
Yeah.
now actively working on healing.
I think that like starts, so it's interesting because we do this work, maybe it's journaling or it's doing the retreats or doing the courses or reading the books or whatever, all of these things, right? And like you said, like trying to just get that to that place with just more peace and just feeling like strong within in this body and this experience. And I think you start to see it. I've started to notice it in little moments where something would have happened before that would have triggered me, and I've responded differently this time, right?
Yes.
And
They're
like,
like little magic awareness moments.
yes,
Yeah, I
or
know
like,
exactly what you're talking about. And oh, okay. I don't want to interrupt you. Go ahead.
no. I just think that like that's kind of what it is versus like a big, huge end destination where it's like, okay. And like some of us, I think, especially when we're attached to like an outcome, like whether it's our body and trying to lose the
Mhm.
weight or whatever, right? We
Yes.
do this
Yes.
also within like our self-development journey of like, well, I'll just get to this place where, but I think it's like also honoring those moments of like, oh my gosh, fuck yeah. Like I just did that organically. I didn't affirmation myself into this feeling like, and just talk myself out of the
Yeah.
ickiness. I
Yeah.
actually feel fucking good right now.
Yes.
Amen.
And for those of you that are listening, if you're going, how do I know if I'm growing? How do I know if I'm healing? I feel like those are the markers where you go, you
Yeah.
know what? It's like a magic moment where you realize that would have triggered me or that would have sent me into a tailspin. But now I get it and I'm able to rise above it and continue to move forward and
Yes.
feel really good.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So,
And it's
okay.
the same thing. If you need like if you need a like, for me, it was like the moment that like I accepted my post baby body, not only accepted it, but actually really found it beautiful. It
Gorgeous.
was like that. Yeah. Like that same
Yeah.
thing of like not looking, I used to, every chance that I saw a part of my body that I didn't like I honed in on it and I gave it hate. Like I didn't just
Yeah.
like, oh, look at that ugly thing. I actually was just like, I hate that about myself. And
Yeah.
I think that like it starts with slowly like looking at yourself in the mirror and just being like, okay, this is my body. And then like, what are some adjustments I can make that make me feel better? Well, I can eat this and I can do that. Like, but this also is just my body. Like there are
Mhm.
like some people that have a certain shaped ass and that's just how their ass is shaped, like,
Yeah,
and
and
they can
that's just
like,
the way it is. Yes, yet our
right.
bodies, like, we're able to have this conversation soul to soul right now because of this meat suit that we live in. And there's so much
Yes.
more than the body. Yet
Oh.
at the same time, I relate to all of that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my gosh, is that flab? Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, I better not,
You
I'm
know
probably
what's, and you know
salad for
what's
the
so,
next week or go on a cleanse or something. And
yeah.
I'm over that now. I mean, actually, let me backtrack. I'm not totally over that. I'm over
Yeah.
the feeling of feeling like I have to beat myself up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
And
aware.
that's right. And so you start to catch yourself, like you start to
Mm-hmm.
notice, like if you're putting something on and feeling icky about it, or if you go shopping for like a swimsuit, for example, right? Like, no, like I
Yeah.
just no. Like I bought like the cutest swimsuit and I went to Florida with Mr. Man, my Mr. Man in my life,
Yes.
and I didn't feel comfortable like taking my dress off to just be in a
Mm,
swimsuit, and I'm like,
yeah.
and he was like so confused because he's like, you look great. And I'm like, yeah, but I
So
have to
beautiful. Yeah.
feel that for myself. And what's so sad
Mhm.
is that like, I used to feel like I couldn't talk about it because when I was in the military, I was a runner. I've always been a runner. And I've always had an athletic body, but still didn't like the way my body looked. And so people would be like, oh, it must be so hard to be a size 0, and it was like, it's
Mhm.
not about my size. It's about how I feel in my body. And
Mhm.
just like the other way where there's women that are extremely skinny or have a little bit more weight or a lot of weight or whatever it is, however their body shape is, I don't really care, but it's like, it doesn't really matter. It's more about what we're putting into it and realizing that like our life force is being represented in that. So when we're filling our body with crappy foods or crappy books or crappy movies or crappy humans, whatever it is, like when we're taking all of this stuff in, it's what's coming out of us. And I think that
Mhm.
like that's the point I got to, was just, I just want to be around good, soulful people and just find the beauty in like watering my plants and find the beauty in making this meal. And then it started to slowly transition into
Right?
finding like the beauty
Yes.
within myself.
Yes, because you realize, well, if I'm trying to achieve this fictional character of perfection that
Oh
nobody can
yeah.
achieve
Yeah.
ever,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I'm working so hard for and breaking my back over and beating myself up for, do I really want to be around other people that are doing the same and valuing
Yeah.
me based on what I look like rather than what I believe or who I am or how I love?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want
Yep.
that. That is not the kind of tribe I want to cultivate. And so I think very similarly to you, that's when I started to go, wait, as a woman who's 33 and, I'm starting to notice like changes, I
Mm-hmm.
started to freak out at first. And then I realized, like, wait a second, who am I freaking out for? Because I'm not trying to be some fictional person who's perfect for men I don't even know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that's kind of what
Yeah.
it comes down to. Like, we're trying to stay attractive to other people.
Uh,
But the thing is like, I want my heart to be attractive. I want my words to be
mm,
like really sexy.
yeah.
Like, of
Because
course,
that emanates.
yes. And I want to look good in that. Like, I want to take good care of my body and exercise because that makes
Yeah.
me feel really good. But I
Yeah.
don't want that to be my focus
Mm-hmm.
at all.
Yeah.
Ever, ever, ever.
It's just an ending like hamster wheel,
Yeah.
because the thing is, in reality, like our bodies are going to continue changing and we're
Yeah.
going to get older and wrinklier and
Yeah.
softer and all of those
Yeah.
things, and we can still be healthy and thriving and nourish these bodies no matter what. And I think like that you get to that point where, I mean, I'm 37 and still I'm not married or anything, and so I started to kind of get into my head about some of that as well. Like I have to keep myself in, as undamaged as I can, like.
Oh.
And then you
Oh.
start seeing like these young women that are like 20 and already getting Botox. And I don't have anything against
No, but
people that
it's
do
so
that, but
unnecessary. It's
why
so
are you doing it?
unnecessary.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you think about it and you're like, who am I trying to do this for? Because the
Yeah.
man that, I mean, I'm married, but the man that you want to spend the rest of your life with, he's not the guy who's going to be like, ooh, your tits look really good. He's going to be the guy that's like, I'm going to love you no matter what.
Oh, yes. Because
So
they
it's,
like do think that your words and your heart and all that are attractive.
yes.
And like this is the thing too, is it's like we are way, I mean, I don't like when people say I'm my own worst critic, because like I don't subscribe to that, but I do think that we're harder on ourselves than we need to be, right? And so like
Yeah.
this is kind of cliche, but like how would you talk to your best friend, right? And so I've been trying to
I
practice
love
that, like
that.
as in my friend is my body, right? And so like
Yeah.
I've been doing actual, like when I put my lotion on, for example, I'm like, oh, look at these thighs, they're so
Yes.
strong, and like
Yes.
just like
Yes, because I've done the same fucking thing.
I love it. Like I just am like, I'm gonna have fun with you, girl. Like, yeah, this is
Yeah.
just, it is what it is. And it's great to have like these, goals of being healthy and everything. But yeah, it's more about how you feel versus like
Yeah.
it's so crazy what has been idealized. And we see more and more women coming out. I've noticed this in advertising, and it's really cool to see, like, swimsuit brands, for example, that have women of all shapes and sizes. It's like, yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. But yet there's still some programming that I'm working through about my own body.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I think this is programming that actually I was just writing in my journal this morning, but I had an eating disorder in high school. And the programming that I still carry around with me a little bit, I mean, I've gotten a lot better, but it was the thinner I am, the more value I have. And I think so often in our culture, that's what's praised. And, you know, in entertainment, I remember going to this competition. I was a size 4, like not a large person. And this woman was like, you need to lose weight. And so I just automatically equated my value to how skinny I was. And it's totally backwards. And again, going back to like, how do I want my life to look? I have no issue with any woman being whatever size you want to be, whether that's a size 0 or a whatever. But the thing is I don't want to sit in a room of women who are obsessed with food and bodies and how we look. I want to sit in a room with women who are like, I am real and authentic and honest, and I like this and I don't like this, and I'm working on this and I'm trying to love this. Like, that's what I want.
Yeah. More of that. Yeah. And I think for me, having a child has put this even more in perspective. When Logan was like 7 or 8 years old, we were going to a water park and he didn't want to take his shirt off. And my son is like actually kind of skinny. His dad's skinny. And so like, he's actually like thin and narrow, I guess, tall and thin. And so I was like, how is it that, I mean, no matter who, like, I feel like it's more prevalent in girls, especially when you get in high school and everything. But like, to have my little boy who's in elementary school and who eats well and who's active and healthy, as far as like he gets good sleep and all of these things, doesn't like his body.
Oh,
And that was
we
like,
have got to heal. We have got to heal, because this is not okay.
yeah, it's heartbreaking when you see it in your child, and then you realize like, I've been doing this to myself every day for however many years, right? I've been hating on my own body. And so like it in that moment when I was on the beach with a man who like is attracted to me and whatever, and is filling me up, not just attractive physically, but just like, he's just a good human being. And I'm still feeling like, oh my God, but there's all these girls with these really cute bodies and I just don't want to be seen right now. And I was like, fuck this. Like, I want to feel the sun on my skin. Like, I want, to feel that feeling. And I want to just
important. The stuff that's actually important.
Yes. And if not now, like when? Like, am I gonna like next year go out and spend all, because I don't want to spend, there's people that are very into fitness and they spend a lot of time and they achieve amazing results and like they love it. I'm not that person. Like, I like food and I like to live my life, and I'm fit, but I like to like also not, what I mean? I'm just not into it.
Yeah. You don't want to be too regimented. I'm the same way.
Yeah.
Like, I love working out, but I'm probably not going to spend 2 hours in the gym 5 or 6 days a week.
I'm not.
I'm
not either.
There's so many things that I want to explore with my mind, and being in the gym is part of it, but not all of it,
I think that there's an awareness around that too that's good for us to realize that, like, instead of like constantly seeking to be whatever idealized version of ourselves in our heads, it's like making that decision of like, if I really wanted to, I could cut out all the things and I could be super, but I just choose to not, and that's okay as well. Like, and so what is that level?
I want the cookie.
Like,
I want the cookie.
Yeah, I do.
And it's okay.
I want all of life.
Yeah,
I want feeling a little softer.
And I love that. I want all of life. And that is like, it's all part of it. It's all part of it. Okay. Yes. So next question, who inspires you most?
Oh,
it doesn't have to be a person.
I'm going to be
something.
Well, I'm going to go with what first came to my mind, because there's obviously a ton of like people that inspire me and that I look to. I don't like to say look up to, because I don't want to put people on pedestal stools, but yeah, that people that just, you're like, you're a really awesome human. But the first person that came to my mind, and it's going to sound kind of corny, but is my son. And I think
Oh, I love that.
it's not just it's not just because he's my son and I'm his mom. It's not like that typical dynamic of like, oh, my son and he's amazing. It's like who he is as a human. So he and I are both Scorpios, and the only sign that I didn't want to have was a Scorpio. And he was due on my birthday, like all of these things, right? And so we had this like soul bond, and I was not planning on getting pregnant. And my his father and I were not really great in our marriage, and we had kind of like obligatory Valentine's Day sex. And then got pregnant. And so it was just this beautiful little, and we actually had already been talking about divorce, and we tried to stay together once we found out I was pregnant, and when we divorced when he was a year and a half old. So anyways, Logan is like not
He's
only
amazing.
does he teach me every day,
He's
oh
amazing.
my gosh, he's so good, but he helps me heal my like inner child stuff, because he'll have a response to something.
Oh my God.
And and I see it, and he's so sensitive, and I realize like, I'm the perfect person to be his mother because I totally get it, and I'm not going to talk him out of his feelings and all of that. But B, when I'm feeling this way, it's that like young Dajon that just needs to be heard, or just needs to cry, or just needs to be held, or just needs some time in nature, right? Like
that is so I'm crying right now because that is so beautiful. Like you think about the parent-child relationship and you think like, here I am, I'm going to help this little person become independent. But then to hear like they help you become independent too and free. How gorgeous is that? Like for anybody who feels like there isn't a God or a higher power, like I just don't get it at this point, because that's so intricate and beautiful in every way.
It is. Like it's interesting because when you ask that question, I think if I would have been like sitting and filling out something or writing an article and asked that question, I would have like thought about it more. But it was like the first thing that came to my mind, which is like, that's a good gift for me.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. I can't wait for him to listen to this podcast and hear how amazing his mom is. I mean, I know he already knows it, but okay. If you could tell your younger self anything, what would it be?
Oh. Once again, I have to go with the first response. Like, you are worthy, like just as you are, and you're living your purpose in this moment right now, whether you see it or not. I think when I look back to everything, even the things I struggle with today in relationships, and my own stuff today, it all stems down to like not feeling loved, like, or lovable or loving. And all of the ways that I've lashed out in the world and hurt people and hurt myself, it all came down to that. Like when you think about decisions we make, we either have a choice to make them based on fear or love. And that's the simplified version of it, but it's true if you really look into it.
So true.
Right? And so the fear-based decisions, when you break those down, it all comes down to like worthiness, like just feeling whole as I am. I think that this is one thing reason I'm still so passionate about working with veterans, not just because I am a veteran, but because the veteran system is like you go to the VA and the more broken you are, the more benefits you get. And so they keep you in this cycle of like being broken, and then they want to medicate. And so then you literally get into your mind that, well, I guess I'm just going to be on this medication for the rest of my life. I guess I'm broken now. And so all of that.
It's such a devastating narrative. I'm broken now.
Yeah, it is. And I get it. Like, I know that there's a time and a place for medication and all of that. But really, when it came down to my own healing journey, it was realizing that I was fucking worthy, to advocate for myself and to find what worked for me. And that meant not getting help from the VA because I didn't claim to be broken enough. That was okay, because there was fear within me there, because think about it. I didn't have health care because I was now a civilian. And if I didn't get it from the VA, I was going to have to pay out of pocket. So like, I have to tell the VA how broken I am in order for them to think that I'm treatable. But, so there was this weird juxtaposition to all of that. So I think that once I realized that I was worthy, the other piece of it is
then you can empower yourself. Like if we, as we're raising children, or if we're doing our own inner child work or whatever, can get back to that worthiness piece, we can now make decisions based from love and not fear. And so now we're doing less damage in the world, less damage to ourselves. And you just have a whole nother outlook. Like you're not viewing life as such a victim or a judge, and you're more just witnessing. That feels very liberating to me.
It is. It is. And I think that's kind of like, if you are on a spiritual path, I think all roads lead to that direction. It's that non-attachment. It's that liberation. It's that I'm going to be satisfied with existing and not judging myself or others in all of these beautiful moments that life has to offer.
Yeah. I was, the other day, I auditioned for a speaking thing that was really important to me. And I was attached to it for a couple of different reasons, and which are irrelevant. But when I got the email that I didn't get it, while my mind knew, and if it were my friend, I'd be like, like there's other opportunities out there, and you did the best you could do, and blah, blah, blah. But I had this like, just this letdown, and I was peeling potatoes because like that's one of my comfort foods. And so I'm peeling the potatoes and I'm like bawling into them, and I just let myself cry. But when I went to my journal and put pen to paper, came back to that knowing that like that doesn't define me, that doesn't mean I'm less worthy. Part of me wanted to stop trying to speak because it was like, rejection, right? But I think that when we close our heart, like that's when all of those limitations come right back.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Those dreams have been placed on your heart for a reason, and it doesn't mean that they're just gonna like slide right into your DMs and be like, I'm opportunity.
We wish. Yeah, I haven't had much of that.
I know, but then when you get there, so then when you do get that TED Talk or whatever it might be, and I think that like for me, that's been the reminder of like when I even open myself up to Mr. Man in my life, and it's scary and it's still vulnerable, but like, it's so liberating when I come from just a place of knowing that I'm worthy and thus loving myself, and knowing that if it doesn't work out, that doesn't mean that I'm not valuable or lovable or loved. So one of the affirmations I've been saying every day is like, I am loved, I am loving, and I am love. And I know that sounds like the same thing, but there's different ways that unwraps in your life.
Like, absolutely. There are distinctions. I mean? Yes, of course. I totally know what you mean. Okay. Well, that kind of goes perfectly into the next question is there a mantra or something that inspires you to hold on during really tough times? Is it that one?
That one's like my daily go-to, but I think that when you're really in the shit, that one can feel a little bypassing. Like when you're really like in the darkness and you're like, I am love. It's like, okay, come on, sister, to like dig deeper. And so, and I like same thing with the dichotomy. Like, yes, I can believe that I am love and still in this moment not be loving myself. Like,
yes. And I love that you're saying this stuff out loud, because I think that I go through all of that, but I feel like the people who are listening to this podcast, that's why these people are listening. Like, what is it? How can we go deeper? How can we dig deeper?
Yeah.
So much more than trying to make ourselves believe something. And it's being honest.
When we bypass the emotion, that's why I was saying, like, when you get to that feeling where you realize that you weren't triggered by that thing that you would have been, and that you didn't affirmation yourself into it. So I'm an affirmation person. I have them all over my house, but there's a difference between like sitting in the mirror and telling yourself, I love my body, I love my body, I love my body, and versus going and actually just coming to you, like where you're just like, damn, I'm rocking it today. Right. And there's like a moment, like there's a fake it till you make it. I get that. And the military, they used to say false motivation is better than no motivation. And so like, great. And we still need to keep trying to get to that point where we actually fucking believe it. Yes. And so for me, like, I am love and I am loving and I am loved. I still believe all that, but in the darkness, the other day when I was sitting and crying over the potatoes, oh man, I really actually questioned my purpose. Like I literally for a moment was like, what the fuck am I doing here? Why do I even want to speak on a stage? Like, why is that important to me? Am I doing it but had I not had that rejection, I wouldn't have questioned it. And I think it's important that we question what we're going after, and we question our value, and we question our purpose.
Yes.
So
yeah, because it either points us in a new direction or it gives us resolve.
Yes, right?
Yeah.
And conviction and devotion. Like, what am I devoted to each and every day? So now I can go into my day and be like, okay, well, if I really am devoted to this, and that really means a lot to me, and I'm choosing this path, like, how can I work toward getting there? What can I change in my day? So I think that my mantra or my daily is, and this might even sound kind of corny, but it's been like very important to me lately, is like, I am living my purpose in this moment now. Each and every day, I'm living on purpose. And so when I'm crying over the potatoes, I'm living in my purpose. When I'm like in my shit, in my feels, in the darkness, it's on purpose, and it's not happening to me, it's happening for me. And I have to believe that. Like, I have to. And it's, what's cool about it is, like, when you actually believe it and you actually have that hope in your heart, it's different than just telling yourself it's true, because I know what it feels like to be suicidal. I know the difference between being in, I don't have a purpose, I'm better off, my son's better off without me. I know that feeling. And I know the feeling of, this fucking sucks, but I'm still living on purpose, and I'm fucking worthy. Like, I just am inherently, because I am.
Yes. Absolutely. Breathe. It's a weight taken off your chest. I think too, though, there's a big part of me that feels like everybody's purpose is to discover who they are and just be that person, that really authentic thing. I think it's so much less about what we do or what we produce, and so much more about who we are. So that really resonates with me too, for those days where I just feel off. Like, I can just be in my purpose by being off right now, because it's going to teach me something.
Yeah. It's not all about producing. We're in such a productivity, or like when people, this used to bother me. Like,
I'm over it.
When you would ask them how they're doing, and they're like, yeah, busy, daily grind, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, I don't fucking know. So, like, how are you doing? And so now I started this contract gig with, like, and I call them civilians, and I don't like mean that in a, cause everybody is a civilian in my life now, pretty much. I mean, but it's funny, cause I'm like, these civilian people, I started this job with them, and we would be in the coffee, or in the room with the coffee, the kitchen thing. And somebody would come in, and it was so interesting to me, because I was in the military, and then I was freelance for 3 years. And so I wasn't used to this like office chatter stuff. And they'd come in, and they'd be like, oh, you got any plans this weekend? Or what'd you do last weekend? And there were people I didn't even know. And I'm like, do they really want to know? Like, I don't understand. And they would just be like, how are you doing? How's things going for you? And I was so shocked. But I realized that, like, people do this, and they don't really want the answer.
Yeah.
And so I just started getting awkward. Like, I just started answering with crazy, like, really, really crazy things. Like, oh, I'm going to clean my toilet with a toothbrush. I'm just going to get in there. I'm just clean it. And I just like to see how they would respond. Because I was like, they don't, whatever.
They don't really
and I was
care.
fun about it. I wasn't being a dick, but like, I think that, like, now when I have a hard time when people go, how are you doing? Because I'm like, I'm going to really tell you. Like, I'm not going to, like, necessarily word vomit on the people at the office, but, like, if I'm having
not going to lie. Yeah,
I'm not going to lie. And so I think that that's, like, a good lesson for us all, like, to really sometimes just stop and take a breath and see, like, what is my body feeling right now, and what do I need? Because like, people talk about, oh, the time flies and the days and this, and does it feel that way for me sometimes too? Yeah. But like, I'm not going to declare that to be my truth. And I want to live in the present moment, and I want to experience, and that means experiencing the darkness and the shadows just as much as I experience the light. So when I stop and take a temperature check regularly throughout my day, sometimes I can realize, oh, I have been sitting at this computer a little too long. I just need to go take a walk. My body needs a walk,
Yes, absolutely.
And that's like living in your purpose.
Like, and that's the clear channel thing too, where you're aware enough to ask yourself those questions.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Okay. What book or books have had the most profound impact on your life? As I'm like doing this podcast and I'm trying to gauge who's really listening to this stuff, I, as a listener, always want tangible things that I can be like, oh, I can do that. I can grab onto that. So that's why I ask this question.
Yeah. I think, like, I mean, there's so many books that I feel like, are like that everybody's read and everybody's like, yeah, like, what's it, like The Big Leap or whatever. I can't, you
Oh
know, or
yeah, I haven't read
stuff
that
like
one yet,
that.
but yeah.
Yeah, where you're like,
Yes.
okay, that's a good one. Or like The Alchemist obviously is like a good
Oh,
one.
yeah.
Um, I think for me, um, the three like came to mind when you said that. There was three. First one's A Course in Miracles, because
Yes.
A Course in Miracles, like for me, changed the game as far as like not making everything about me. And
Mm,
but yet it is, but it's not, you know, like, and
yes.
so
Yeah.
so that was really big, just detaching and everything. Right now I'm reading Untamed by Glennon Doyle,
Yes,
and
me too, of course.
that one I'm like all in it. It's like all about unleashing myself, and that I'm super 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 enjoying. And then there was one recently called Everything is Fucked, and it was funny because it was
Mm.
actually recommended to me by a Virgo, and this particular Virgo is very suspicious and very like
Oh.
sciency, you know? And so I
Yeah.
was like, I don't know about this. It's called Everything is Fucked, when I'm like over here, like the universe has my back. And
Yeah, so totally. I have that book too.
so it was actually good because there were some moments in it where it was talking about like artificial intelligence, and about like someday when artificial intelligence takes over and like the need for humans is irrelevant, and how we won't even think for ourselves, and blah 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 blah. And I think it's the same thing with me when I go to church. I still can get inspired at church, and some of the things that they say remind me of what I believe to be true and give me back that conviction. So
Oh, that's
everything,
beautiful.
yeah, Everything is Fucked reminded me, there actually was some good parts of it that were inspiring, but a lot of it was like me being like, no, like there is a purpose to human connection, and there is like a purpose to us having personalities and desires,
Mm-hmm.
all of that,
Yeah.
right? And so like it got me back into like the understanding, because sometimes when I see all of these coaches and all of this like live your best life and blah 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 blah, like I can feel a little detached from the human experience of like how I should be showing up in the world. But when I realized like no, I do believe in all of this to be true, I don't know, it just connected me back to like my humanness.
Yeah, and that resolve again. I love that. Okay.
Yeah.
What do you want people to know beyond a shadow of a doubt?
Mm. Oh man. I think the thing that's like gets me in my feels the most is like people, I don't know, like people just really not believing in themselves enough to speak up, or feeling that they don't belong. I don't think that, I hear this from a lot of people, and it's people from all different walks of life. And so like when you see somebody just really not believing in themselves at all, like you could feel it, like you really know they're not just having a bad day, like they literally don't believe that they can make a difference in their own life, or that they have any value. And I mean, we keep kind of coming back to self-worth, but it's like,
It's the kind of everything though. It
it's that
is.
like them being able to like, and I see a lot of, even around here, I live in an area now, my ex-husband loves this area called White Bear Lake in Minnesota, and it's very like Pleasantville-ish, and
Mm,
there's a lot of like, my son plays hockey, and the hockey moms are just like in their own little bubble, and it's just like a weird reality that I live here, and it's very suburbia and kind of detached and surface level. And but even though they have the house and they have the kids, and many of them are housewives and stuff, and they just, when you talk to them one-on-one, you can like, they just don't value themselves like inherently. Like their value is in being a mother, their
yeah.
value is being in a hockey mom, or their value is in all of these things. But when it actually comes down to like, if all of that was stripped away, who would they be? And that makes me sad.
Yeah.
Like even when you see like, I like being in the mental health place, or the mental health ward, even being there, even though I was there with all of those people, there was a difference between the people that were depressed and going through stuff, and the people who you could tell like literally just didn't want to feel the pain anymore and just wanted to be dead. Like they just didn't, they were so overwhelmed and so hurting. And I think that like when we hear about people doing bad things in the world, or people just being jerks or whatever it is, like I think about like what's going on in their life.
Yeah. To
That
get
they
to that point.
literally have, yeah, the ability to just be a jerk to a stranger, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
And
Well, and I
yeah.
think that is so often a reflection of where that person is and how they feel about themselves, you
Mhm.
know?
I've been there.
Yeah. Oh,
Like
and
I
I think I think it's part of the human experience, but it's also part of the human experience to have the choice to pick ourselves back up or to say, just because somebody treated me like that doesn't mean I'm going to turn around and treat them like that. I can stop the cycle.
yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a difference when you get to the point, because I have been a very not like manipulative person, but definitely like, oh, you hurt me, like you were saying, like, okay,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I've definitely like cut people out of my life just out of like pure, like in my mind, I was thinking like, oh, well, you know, time to drive on. And I'm a
Mhm.
Scorpio, so I can easily cut people out of my life. But there's so much more juiciness when I actually do the work and heal the relationship in a good way. And like sometimes that, does mean no communication, but often even with like exes, when I have like that, I'm friends with a lot of them because we've had that full circle moment in our relationship where we decided to end it, but we could still have respect for one another, and it's such a
Mhm.
like better place to be. Like it's like, it is well with my soul. Whenever I see that, I think that's like a Bible thing, but like,
Mhm.
it's not just the believing like, well, it's well with my soul because whatever, like I have faith, blah, 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 blah. Like it's actually doing the work, and making it well
Mhm.
with your soul because you can.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. This has been so much fun. Where can people find you
Yes.
online? I want to make sure that people can follow up with you if they want.
Yeah. So on Instagram, I'm just dajon.love. So DAJON.love. That's my website, dajon.love. And then on Facebook, it's just Dajon, like DAJON. That's the cool thing about having a weird name, is it's like super
Y-
simple.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's so cool. It's been hard for me to get like all of the names that I want for me because I guess my name is more common.
Right?
But okay, I want to make sure I didn't skip over anything. Is there anything else that you want to share with people?
Oh,
I know
I
that's such a
guess,
big open question.
yeah, I think it's just like we talked about this earlier, but it's a good like reminder that like, even though, like for example, you go to my Instagram or your Instagram, and it's really easy to like look and go like, oh wow, like they take pretty photos and they
Mhm.
they talk
Mhm.
this way and they're so whatever, but like each of us have this within us, and I just want to encourage people to like seek out those things that light them up. So whether it's starting the thing or a group in your community, or I don't know what it is, but I feel like I'm going through some growing pains right now and trying to step more bravely into the things that I really want to be doing with my life. And even if I can, I don't know, we all have our own struggles, and just keep moving forward, like just keep growing, because like now more than ever, we have the ability to make huge, massive changes in the world. Like when people get so caught up in like the politics and the everything, like, yes, it's important. Yes, I vote. Yes, I research all of that. But like
Mhm.
really at the base core level is just managing this each and every day. And like knowing that those desires are keys, like they're keys to the next chapter in your life. And it's not necessarily about like achieving and getting to this thing, like speaking on the stage or doing the podcast or whatever it is, like just in reference to what we talked about earlier. But it's like there are these little levels, like in Super Mario Brothers,
Yeah,
these
it's
little
not
levels
what you
that,
do, it's who you are. We just need to
yes,
keep digging and digging and digging into our own selves. And I think that's where we're going
yes,
to find peace and joy and contentment. And throughout this conversation, you've talked and referenced journaling several times. And I feel like the people in my life that are the most self-aware are the people who journal regularly.
yeah, yeah.
So,
I think
if you're listening to this and you feel like you're a newbie and you don't know where to begin, I feel like journaling is one of the easiest ways to start.
so good. I started this journal I have a couple journals, but one of my journals is to like my future partner. And I'm not a person
Mm.
who like necessarily believes that we only have like one soulmate or whatever, but I do feel like I was wanting to call in a partner. And so I started to journal to this person, and it was really cool because it wasn't like, yeah, and I call it manifesting, like with a double MAN.
Mhm.
But I was actually like, right? Yeah. But it was like giving me the opportunity to get into the energy of like what that would feel like. So yes, we can have the lists of like what we desire, but so often, even if you look back 5 years ago where you thought you would be at in life, it's probably different than what you thought, right? And
Correct.
so instead of getting so caught up in like, this is where I want to be in 5 years. Yes, set the goals, do the things, but also like when we can focus on the feeling of like, what do I want to feel? I want to feel more free. I want to feel more comfortable in my body. I want to feel more like or stronger, right? And so the same thing with like when we're trying to call a new energy into our life and we start to embody it. So if I want to find a man who is emotionally aware and has emotional intelligence and is strong, but yet can still cry, like, then I need to be able to do these things. And so it's cool because instead of me focusing on calling this man in, which I was doing, but in a really fun way, it was pointing to me areas in my life that like I want to get better at. You know, I want to be a really good parent. And so if I want to call in a man who can be a really good parent, like how can I be a really good parent? And so I think journaling is a great chance for reflection, but what's really cool is you get to go back and look at some of it. And so one of the references I made, and this is kind of a random thing, but one of the references I made in this book or in this journal is I started calling this man Mr. Blackbird. I have no idea why. Like I was literally like, this will be a sign in the future when I meet you.
Yeah.
And this is what's coming in. So Mr. Man that's in my life now
Yeah.
has a tattoo of a blackbird on him. And so, and I didn't even connect it. Like I, you know, we spent time together and I realized he had this tattoo and I was like, what's the significance and blah, blah, blah. And I didn't connect the two. But later I went back and read this old journal and realized that I had been calling this person Mr. Blackbird and saying, when I meet you, I'll know because, well, this will be a sign.
This will be the sign.
And I think that that's the other part about journaling that's so amazing is it's this beautiful space for us just to like, and breathe and just to stop. And when you put pen to paper, I think it's even for me, not typing, it's important for me to actually write.
Totally.
And it slows us down and it really just like gets it out. But I think it's also cool to see how far we've come and to also like go and be like, oh my gosh, I wrote about this 5 years ago and now here it's happening. And when we believe in that magic and that we can create it, we don't feel so powerless or hopeless or like, ugh, you know?
Yeah. It's an unraveling and an untangling. So super quick story. When I was little, probably in between like 10 and 12, I had this crazy premonition that I was going to marry somebody named Henry. And I don't really even remember thinking about marriage at that point. But guess what Sam's full name is?
What?
Samuel McHenry Thurmond. How wild is that? And I didn't even remember that until like after we had gotten married. And I don't know if I had journaled it somewhere, but I was like, what in the world? So all that to say, like, whether you believe it or not, I totally believe that we are being supported and held and loved every single second of every single day.
Yeah, we are.
Thank
and you can tap into that whenever we want.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. This was such a gift.
Oh, for me too. Okay, I'm going to end the recording now.
All right.